I think.
Okay.
I'm always looking at it now on my phone. It's a very fancy setup. Hello from Practice Circle.
Good morning.
Yay! I've had a red eye, so I'm really excited today. Some exciting announcements before we get started. We have a really cool topic today, body reading for depths. But we have Connections coming up, and Connections is going to go over the first two texts from Pamela Markarian-Smith, and that is May 11th through the 13th and May 18th through the 20th, and you can take those weekends separately, so Connections 1 and Connections 2. Do you want to add a little bit more about that, Alexis, or?
Yes, Jules.
Or Jules
and Well, we're going to do a lot of hands-on practice so that you really feel comfortable with the material in that sense. And you will learn all of the material that we have. Yeah. So we are going to be teaching it together.
Right. And I'll be taking it.
And Leslie will be taking it.
Yeah, it just starts at the beginning and talks about the theory and the philosophy behind Jin Shin Jyutsu, and then how to practice it, how to work with the body, and how to understand the connections between all the different elements.
Mm-hmm. So you will get to see very many different perspectives of how it all ties in together. So it will be a lot of information. And after that, we will always be here, of course, having the practice circle, so to follow it up.
Yeah.
And that is a nice thing. So we hope that you will all join us either by webinar or live in person.
In person, you get all of the hands-on experience. So
that's a really important part of it, of course, because that's what it's about.
Yeah.
And so we do recommend that, but if you can't, then you can always get also a body to invite a body over. When we do the practice, you can practice with us.
I think that's probably so important. So yeah, if you're going to take it via webinar, make sure you have a friend that you can practice on, because I think that it would be hard to sit there and watch everyone else practicing and be left out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that will be fun.
And then you have Cause and Effect.
I have Cause and Effect coming up in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. So it will be in Dutch, and so for all the Dutch-speaking people from Holland and Belgium, that will be nice if you can join. And we have a really interesting class outline for that, also with a lot of practice and specific projects. We will talk about case studies and how to take them and how to make a complete treatment plan for your clients. So that will be very, very interesting, because this is really the way in which we should work, is to take a case study and build a complete treatment program and see how the body reacts, and then build on that.
It's a great way to learn more about what you're doing and what works, and it's also a great way to learn about particular bodies and clients.
Yes, yeah. And then after that, we will bring the class to New York. All right. So I'm very, very happy to have Dora here, who's our demo today. And what we're going to talk about is how we can see the depths on the body. And this is a request from Leslie. And is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I would just say that very often when we body read, we're reading for different purposes. You know, we're reading to identify needs in the body and which flows are appropriate. But since depth is part of this as well, I just, for my own information, wanted to know what the visual cues are.
And of course, when Jules and I give sessions to people, we look at all of that at once, really. This is why the Cause and Effect class is also so interesting, because you see that when a client comes in, I quickly visually view everything from every perspective, really, and then listen to pulse and then put the whole picture together. So the more training you have and the more practice you have, you will get that sense of it, right? And it is similar for you to all of it at the same time. So this is a part of it, because other than looking at the body, we have the scanning, listening to pulse, and all of it happens within the first few minutes. Really, the client comes in. So we have different ways to look at it. We're going to look at the toes, We're going to look at the feet and the fingers and the hands. We're going to look at the head, and we're going to look at
The main central.
the main central. We're going to start with that. You want to start with the fingers or?
Sure. Well, one thing that we know is that the fingers are great for help harmonizing emotions. And so on that level, that's what we call the depth level. It harmonizes the essence of the depth. And so thumb has to do with worry. It's the earth element. And the index finger has to do with fear. It's the water element. The middle finger has to do with anger. It's the wood element. Ring finger has to do with sadness. That's air. And little finger has to do with trying too hard or pretense, and that's fire element. So it's first step, fourth, third, second, fifth, right? So that's on the depth level. And so,
Yeah,
that's
so we-
one of the first self-help things that
Right. So when, for example, when a pinky is sticking out, it tells you something about the fifth depth. Or when a thumb is pulling in, it tells you something about the first depth. So that's how we look at the hands.
Right. So an example of the thumb would be like babies sucking their thumbs. They're often working on their digestion or skin surface, stuff that, that's the depth that's really sort of in charge of babies and infants. So the first step is really important, and you can see that through the sucking of the thumb and stuff.
There are adults who do this unconsciously,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, I think that's really sort of going, the palm of the hand is sixth depth, which I didn't say because I didn't see the palm. But so that in a way is curling into the source, sixth depth, going in for like the deep source energy. So sometimes that's what we're going for. Or just comfort, looking for some sort of security and comfort, which is also something that first depth provides. So then on another level, you can see the organ flows on the hands. So lung starts in the chest and comes to the thumb and the index finger. And then large intestine starts at the index finger and then goes back up to the shoulders and face. And then at the same time we also have heart, which starts in the chest and comes to the little finger, and then small intestine that goes to the face. And then we have diaphragm, which also starts in the chest and comes to the middle and ring fingers, and then umbilicus, which starts in the ring finger. So we can see those three depths: second depth with lung and large intestine, fifth depth with heart and small intestine on the little finger, and then sixth depth with diaphragm and umbilicus. And so that's on the organ function.
Yeah. So in this way, it is interesting because you can ask, okay, do you look on an organ function level or do you look at a depth level? And that is what the practitioner kind of has to figure out, looking at all the other things and listening to pulse to see what is really in need. Is it an organ function or is it on a depth level? And how are we going to most effectively harmonize it?
It's like, so for example, if someone has an issue with their thumb, if they're complaining about stiffness or pain in their thumb.
Yes,
was the other
I had
day.
that last Friday, and Jules gave me a session, so I told her I had some, it's like an aching pain in my thumb, and myself I had a feeling it was a second depth issue. So it could be second depth. We were also thinking it could be mediator or second depth, and I had a feeling it was second depth. So she did a lot of second depth on me, and actually it's cleared.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So then you know that you're on the right track.
And it was interesting in your pulses because the texture of your pulses was a second depth, sort of hard, rocky feeling, but there was also a little lift in your waistline. So that would relate maybe to digestion, first step. And so I felt the confirmation in the pulses, and then went with sort of a combination.
Yeah.
Flow, which is second depth.
Yeah.
And I also use the thumb function energy, which has to do with digestion.
Yeah. It's a second reversing and increasing the second.
Yeah, that's
right.
right, with the second. Yeah, so that's how we can see relationships between, like, so the thumb really shows the relationship between first depth and second depth. On the depth level it's first depth, and on the organ function level it's second depth, and so then that opens up a whole thing to meditate on for the rest of your life.
Is this painful? Here? Too much? So we need more gentle?
Yeah, so then we could go to the feet, yeah. Because the hands have a lot more to do with emotions because they're in the upper part of the body. And so they have to do with our thinking and our feeling, and they're what we feel the world with. So that's why we talk about emotions in the hands. We often don't talk about the toes and the feet that way. We mostly just talk about them in terms of the organ flows.
So looking at the toes, we know that the bladder flow goes here. So the outside of the little toe has to do with the fourth depth and the bladder flow. And then the inside of the little toe has to do with the kidney energy. So always feeling which one is tighter, right or left. Actually, this one is probably a little tighter on her. Because we're always balancing between right and left. So that is the little toe tells you a lot about the fourth depth, and then the ring toe tells you about the gallbladder energy, because that runs through the organ function runs through the little toe, and then the middle toe, no, the eye toe, the second toe, and the middle toe, and the ring toe. Also, this means
not the ring toe.
No, not the ring toe. So these three toes help the stomach function energy, because the stomach flow goes right here and to those three toes. So if something is showing up there, it tells you something about the stomach flow. And then the liver and spleen flow go into the big toe. So that's how we look at it on the depth level in the toes. So moving along to
one thing that you can think about in particular with the feet is that the stomach function comes down the top of the foot, and then bladder and kidney have to do with the bottom of the foot, the back of the body, and then you see gallbladder and liver on the sides, liver on the medial side and gallbladder on the lateral side.
Yeah.
So that's like another way to start thinking about the depths in relation to the body, is that first depth has to do with the front of the body often, and the center. It goes down sort of the center part, and then fourth depth often has to do with the back. So bladder comes down the back and in three lines, and really.
And then kidney comes up here, deep into the knee here. So yes,
third depth is always on the sides, and if you look at the pathway of the gallbladder, it zigzags on the side of the head, and it zigzags along the flanks, and then goes down the side of the leg. Yeah. And so it's sort of the seam between the front and the back.
So if somebody, for example, is very full on one side of the thigh, we can look at the gallbladder flow. So that's another way to look at the depth, when you understand how the organ functions flow, which is very important to look at.
So with this body, you can see her feet are pointed down. She's a dancer, so.
Yeah,
That's
so they
often a telltale sign that someone's a dancer. Sounds really smart when you ask them if they do ballet. But so initially I would think bladder flow, fourth depth. Yeah, just because of the.
Also, she's recovering from an injury, which was right here, Dora, right in here. Yeah. So.
In the 24.
Yeah, more in the 24 area. There were 3 tendons here that she hurt, so she's recovering from that. So that's why I'm holding her 16 here, kind of to the front, to just help that.
So in addition to a bladder flow, could you do a 24?
Sure.
Flow with it, would it complement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like 24, 26. And there's also the back of the leg flow,
Oh,
which
yeah.
works for 24.
And the 14th flow, because that would help the stomach and the gallbladder flow, which run right through here. So let's move along to that page with how the depths come into the main central source. So we're going to talk about that.
So
But it's another very, very important and helpful way.
This is the page. Hopefully
You can.
You can?
Yeah.
It's the energy all combined timing, or all time combined. And it's just the order of creation. So the order of the depths coming into the thoracic spine and creating the body. So Leslie's looking at me like, what the hell are you doing?
Do you want to, why don't you open your section?
Yeah.
I think it's page
Or you can
44.
do it, I'll just do this.
America. Or you can use this page. Yes.
So we talk about.
So you see order of creation, depth, season, fertilizer.
So when we learn the organ flows, we talk about the energy coming in from the 6th depth through the blueprint of 3rd depth. And then first manifesting in 2nd depth with the
Yeah,
lung.
the lung, right?
And so that's our first organ flow or energy that becomes manifest. And it's really
Because we need the breath.
We need the breath, yes. And so 2nd depth has a lot to do with manifestation of the body because of that. And the breath has a lot to do with that. And so this page shows that order on the main central level. And so you'll see in the lumbar spine.
Yeah, because
the back.
people can see it. Oh,
So
Dora, can you flip over? Yeah. So yeah, just show it on the body so that people can see it. I'll keep holding her 16.
So at the 2 at the top of the hip bone, the iliac crest, if you come to the spine, you're kind of at L2, lumbar 2, and that's, or just a little bit below it. So that's 2nd depth, where 2nd depth comes into the main central, and so between L2 and, I don't know all the vertebrae by heart, but thoracic 12, that's sort of the 2nd depth area, lung and then large intestine, right?
Yeah. So there's
So the lumbars
yeah.
all have to do with 2nd depth.
Yes.
And in that,
In
it's
that- in
interesting
that way,
when
yeah.
we talk about the lumbar circle, that's when we're talking about more manifested things in the body. It's dense down. Right? So that's another way to think about, that's the manifestation and the physicality of the body
Yeah.
in that area.
So sometimes when I work with people, I feel it is very dense exactly in that area. It's about from the 2 area to 23. That whole area is just very dense and full and tight, and it almost feels like a wall. And so that tells me it's not about the 2nd depth. What's going on is the 2nd depth in their body. So that's how you can feel that.
So that's 2nd depth, and then the next, after we have lung and large intestine, we move into the stomach. Large intestine ends at the 21, the stomach starts over. So that's 1st depth, and that's up at T1. Is that what it says? second thoracic, so T2. So right below the big guy.
So you
And
see
so
how
you can see then first step has to do with the cervical spine. So
Mhm.
we go there
Mhm.
up to C4 or C1.
Mhm. So any neck projects, there is a relationship to the first step already. And also just note, because it took me a while to see that, but you see how from the second depth, the first organ functions that are to be manifested, we go into first depth, which is the next one in the order of creation.
Yeah. So it's we're not going linearly first, second, third, fourth, fifth. We're going. This is the order of the 5-pointed star, and it's the order that the organ flows circulate through the body. So do second depth is here, first depth is here. Then if you want to turn back over, after you circulate stomach and spleen, then fifth depth comes in. And so heart is at the top of the head, and then small intestines here. Do you want to reach up? So small. Yeah. Heart at the top of the head, small intestine here. So that's fifth depth. And fifth depth has a lot to do with the head and the brain. Actually, the brain and the spirit is where the spirit level of the body is. And then after fifth depth, we go into fourth depth.
Yes.
So first we'll have bladder at the center of the sternum between the third ribs, and then kidney at the base of the sternum.
Yeah, so again, so if a project shows up in the breast area, there's a relationship between the fourth depth. And again, if you look at, for example, the 13 flow, you think about that relationship of the fourth depth. on
You're
this
holding
level.
here on the 13th flow. And so you're really working with opening up
Yeah.
bladder and kidney
Yes.
and helping breathing, helping second depth through that way. And then we go down, fourth depth. Fourth depth bridges back into sixth depth. And so at the umbilicus, we have diaphragm, and then at the pube we have umbilicus. And so this whole abdominal area has to do with sixth depth. And that's our source. So that's where we go for nourishment.
For nourishment, right?
And then
And it's reproductive too,
it's
right?
reproductive,
Yeah.
so it's creating life,
Right.
both in ourselves, but then also
Yeah.
creating new life. And then it finishes its descending function and comes around, and so then we have at the coccyx and the sacrum,
Yeah.
we have third depth. And so first third depth was blueprint. Now we've cycled
Yeah.
back into third depth being the blood
Yeah.
essence.
Yes, very beautiful. Beautiful way to present it.
Yeah,
Jules.
is that good?
Yes.
So
very-
oftentimes, like someone will start a session, right, and they'll go right to the sacrum coccyx, and that's to help that third depth energy come in and start this movement, which is the natural order.
I do that very often. Most of the time I start on the coccyx and I like to sit on the left side
Yeah.
for that. Exactly for that reason. The little source of life, it gets everything moving, and it's a nice place to start from and kind of let everything sink in what you have observed and what you allow to come in, what you're going to do that day. Right?
Yeah, it allows the inspiration to come into you
Yes,
also as a
yes.
practitioner.
Yes. Good. So we're going to look at some. Is that it, Jules?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the head a little bit, and this is from the Trinity Manual, textbook 3, on page 66. So the only thing is that, just a note on this page, the fifth depth is supposed to be inside the head. Okay, so that is not clear here. The fifth depth is supposed to be inside the head, so it's not here on the outside. So another way to look at the depth is we can look at the head and how the different depths manifest in the head. And so the first depth is right here on this area around the temples. So that tells you something about the first depth. And then sometimes you see like a ridge that's higher here on the forehead, and that tells you about the second depth, and it also has to do with thinking. So when people have a very extended forehead, I usually ask them if they think a lot, and usually their head also feels very heavy, and they say, yes, I do think a lot. So, and deeply seated in the middle of the head is where we can access the fifth depth. And when we do the first step of the main center source, this is a way to access that fifth depth. So there's very few ways to access the pineal and pituitary gland, and this is a way to do it. So that's deeply seated in the head. And then the back of the head at the base of the skull has to do with the fourth depth. So again, when that is it's a little congested here. When that is congested, that tells you something about the fourth and also something about the fourth depth. Or if people have headaches in this part of their head, it tells you something about the fourth depth. It's really here, the lowest part of the head. Or sometimes you feel like a fullness also, maybe even if there's like a depression or something, that tells you something about the fourth depth. You want to do bladder flow to pull the energy out of the head and down. Then we have, let's see, the third depth is right above, it's a little tight in here too, feel it? On the left side, yeah. So for Dora, her 4 and her high 4 are a little bit tighter on the left. It's more this one. So it's more on the fourth depth, on the regular 4. So the energy is stuck at the 4, so it's not ascending to go over the top of the head. So I would work on this 4 here from her. So, okay, so to review, the back of the head, the most back is the fourth depth, then right above that we have the third depth. And sometimes you feel like a little puffiness in that area of the third depth. That also may indicate that people are heavy in their head and you need to pull the energy down out of the head. And then we have the fifth depth deeply seated inside the head. And the second depth right here on the front, and the first depth right here on the side. So when you think...
both sides.
Yeah, on both sides, so here and here. So that is one way to look at the head. The other way, of course, is to look at that here runs the bladder flow on an organ function level again. On the sides around the gallbladder flow. And the stomach flow begins here and going down. The large intestine flow ends here. So these are all ways to look at it again from a different perspective. Anything you want to add?
The one thing that I think about with fifth depth being in the center of the head is that fifth depth has that nature. So it's also the heart, which is in the center of our rib cage.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the depth that we have in our body that we protect and surround. So fifth depth with the pineal and pituitary glands in the head, and then the heart in the center, and then we access those things also by like the big toe and the thumb. And so they're like the sort of the odd things out. But the big toe looks like sort of has the shape of the head. And so that's and the
big toes clear the head, right? When you hold them.
Yeah, and the high what's the number of fifth depth is 7, the harmonizing number of fifth depth. And so the 7 helps to clear the head. So I see that connection between those things.
Leslie, does
Yes.
that answer
Well, it just
most of
really,
the question?
yes, I can see, but of course, as with anything Jin Shin, there's so many different connections, and I sort of uncovered the rock, and you know, and I'm thinking, oh, there's so much more. But you know, it's a process. It's a process of learning.
It's a process of learning.
Making all those connections.
Yeah.
Yes. So we will go over this in depth in connections in the class, all of this, and you'll get a lot of practice to put all of this together, because of course this is where Jin Shin Jyutsu is a lifetime study. We have both been studying over 20 years, and still learning, and that's when the more you practice and study is when you start to see all these connections. So we welcome comments and questions, and thank you so much, Jules. That was great.
Yay.
Dora, thank you. She's gonna go back to work.
Thanks, Dora.
And we'll